Where in high school, I was like, if I'm being honest, I didn't have very many friends. I didn't have shit to do. Like I was just alone with my thoughts all the time. And that's when I was like, I think the most creative. It was like I was teaching myself how to play guitar. Hello, folks. My name is KJ Sidberry. I'm a New York native. Born and raised in Harlem and Stamford, Connecticut, actually. Spent some time in San Francisco, which is when I had the pleasure and the opportunity of meeting the great Andy in the context of a job that we had together at Accent. Things just kind of took a turn from there.
Welcome back to Shooting the Shit with Andy. That was 2 clips from our episode today. We jump right into it, and so I hope you enjoy the show.
Yeah, so in high school, I was super into slam poetry amongst a lot of other weird-ass hobbies. And so, like, yeah, as an extension of that, I was like, you know what? Let me fancy myself a rapper and come up with some, like, different songs. And it was back when like GarageBand was super accessible and Macs were being distributed in high schools for the first time. So you're like, yo, I'm about to like spit some heat.
Wait, I love that.
There was no heat. It was ice cold. Well, it was the opposite of heat. It was bereft of heat.
Yeah, but you said something interesting that they distributed Macs at your high school.
So yeah, so like I went to this really small college prep school. My graduating class was like 60 kids, and weirdly enough, the high school was technically more expensive than my college.
It's insane.
Yeah, it was absolutely insane. So like what I didn't recognize at the time, and I discovered this later, was that it was like the high school of like all of the wealthiest people on the fucking planet. So like I remember I went to school with this kid named, and I remember his name being spelled weird. Like it was like, I was like, oh, that's kind of funny. I've never seen it spelled that way. And didn't think of it for years. It wasn't until years later, and I mean like damn near recently, that I put 2 and 2 together where I was like, the family that owns basically all of fucking. And so suddenly it made fucking sense why homeboy showed up to school one day in a Lamborghini.
That's insane.
Yeah, it was wild. And like you thinking back on it, I started connecting last names in particular, and I was like, whoa, this high school was legit. Which is sad, unfortunate, but like it was an interesting company to keep.
Yeah.
But it was wild because I fucking hated high school.
That's really crazy. In high school, do you think it was worth how much you paid for it? Like, was it harder than college, for instance?
No. So it was a lot easier than college. So it was weird because it was an interesting dynamic. So one, I got into that high school for free.
Mm-hmm.
I took effectively the equivalent of an aptitude test. And it was based on that score that they decided to give me full tuition. And I think the thinking there was that, all right, this kid is obviously poised for some degree of academic excellence, which we can then potentially profit off of. And so the investment into his future will eventually pay dividends for us later. I think there was some accuracy to that because like that, I think that ended up materializing. But what was weird is that it was not something that I recognized in myself. So coming into high school, I distinctly remember having a conversation with my mom, and it was around the classes that I wanted to take. And she and I were both of the opinion that like, oh, maybe we should just take 1 honors and just like maybe slow crawl from there, because this is my first time in a private institution. These kids are coming from backgrounds that I clearly did not. Let's not get too far over our skis and kind of figure it out from there. And then actually, and this is one of the reasons why like I hold teachers to such high degree, partly because my mom and my stepfather were teachers and educators, but also because this moment I think dramatically changed the trajectory of my life. I got into contact with a woman by the name of Dr. Kisnashenko. She was my math teacher, and immediately she called me out. She's like, I'm going to butcher the paraphrase, and I'm going to put it in my own vernacular. She was like, you stupid bitch. Like, you are entirely too smart to be shortchanging yourself.
Oh, wow.
She recognized that I was not taking full advantage of, I guess, call it gifts, call it perseverance, call it whatever, where I wasn't doing enough to challenge myself. And so she became my academic Sherpa. She was the one who was really forcing me to kind of extend beyond my comfort zone and explore things that would otherwise be like academic challenges, in a pursuit of just like one, education, but more than that, unlocking opportunity. And so like any success that I have from a professional perspective, and certainly from an academic perspective, I very, very much attribute to her.
Wow, that's crazy. I mean, maybe that is why the school is so expensive. Finding like mentors like her,
yeah,
is like life-changing if you think about it.
Truly, yeah. And it didn't strike me as weird until I had conversations with other folks that like my school was one in which they hired PhDs to teach physics. Like the reason why the shit was so expensive is because like they cared about the faculty, and the faculty were incredibly overqualified to kind of like deliver learning in this context.
Yeah, I can't imagine like a PhD at the level that is able to teach very basic things to people, because like they're so far ahead. Sometimes the best teachers are the people who are like a few steps ahead of you.
It can translate. I mean that's what ended up kind of being the brilliance in all of this, was that these people were obviously incredibly gifted, incredibly smart, talented, and overqualified, but they were still able to articulate things in a way that still made it manageable and accessible for a high school audience. And I think that was like, they were gifted not only in the subject matter of which they had domain expertise, but also in just teaching. Like they were just good teachers.
So they're also good teachers on top of their PhDs.
Precisely,
okay, that is very important.
So they weren't defined at all, or not completely, but like their subject matter area. And in fact, a lot of them were multidisciplinary. Like I know one professor, his name was Dr. Zobek. He was our AP Spanish teacher. Homeboy learned Spanish just like everyone else in the pursuit of other endeavors. Like he just like, Spanish was literally a byproduct as in terms of his pursuit into anthropology. And this guy was accomplished in so many different disciplines. Spanish was probably the least sophisticated thing that he actually had some type of ownership in, but I think he identified a gap in that school for Spanish, and so he was like, oh yeah, I guess I'll just teach AP Spanish.
Yeah, that's
incredible. Like, a lot of these professors, a lot of these teachers were just so qualified in so many different arenas, so many different realms, that they could potentially teach anything, really. But like they just chose what was either, incumbent to them or where there were gaps. But the underlying, I guess, trend in all of them was that they were just good teachers to begin with.
So maybe you're not giving them enough credit in terms of how influential the high school was to prepare you for maybe college. Because if they're teaching you so much information like that, it'd probably make college a bit easier.
So I don't know if it made it easier necessarily. I'll definitely acknowledge is that like they definitely deserve credit for a lot of the things that I've pursued and accomplished in life. That being said, this is isolated almost purely to the teachers. And don't get me wrong, I had some gripes with the teachers too. Like I definitely had a guidance counselor who advised me not to apply to Ivies. I've had teachers who expressed shock when I got in. Like there are definitely some negative impressions that I have, but like there are a handful of teachers, Dr. Kisnashenko being the main one, who I think definitely helped really like adjust the trajectory of my life. But I think more than anything, they taught me how to learn, which I think is like, that's just great. And I think I take that to this day. And I think that's largely what contributed to my exploration of consulting and VC, which are just like knowledge-based industries where learning is like the name of the game. But I definitely give them the flowers. But where I find fault in my high school experience is not with the teachers, it's with the social life. When you have a bunch of overprivileged motherfuckers and a tight-knit environment, it was like Gossip Girl every single. It was brutal. I like to this day, like I don't really connect with anyone from my high school. I caught lunch with one guy not too long ago, and he was of a similar mindset. He was like, yo, dog, when's the last time you spoke to someone from high school? I was like, never. And he was like, yo, me too. I don't even know why we're here.
Damn,
like,
that's crazy.
It's insane.
Yeah, so it's more the social aspect that was very jarring.
Yeah, it was brutal. I mean, on so many different dimensions. I think, one, you're coming from a place not of privilege, surrounded by people of privilege. One. Two, I was the only person of color in which academics was my thing. Like I distinctly remember being the only black dude that wasn't on the football team, for example. And I remember the first day that I stepped foot on campus. I remember it was like a lunch or some like free moment. I identified the black table because, there was a black table because like minorities was just not a thing at the school at the time. I remember going up to the table, and I remember the first question that they asked me was not what my name was. That was irrelevant. It was like, what are you mixed with?
Ooh.
It was almost as if the license to be meant that you needed to be something that was other than what belonged to the minority demographic. And that I sit with that. Like all the time. It's just like that was the permission slip. That was the license. That was the grant. That was the admission fee to even be in a space like this, is that you had to have been mixed with something. because otherwise being purely black or otherwise just meant that like you're an other.
People suck, especially kids. Like kids, they're savage.
Yes. I was like, fuck a dictator. I'd take a dictator over a high school student any day of the week.
Like growing up is brutal for young kids, especially if you don't have like parents who can kind of help intervene, and more than that. Actually, I don't even know how you would navigate situations like that.
I mean, like, yeah, you kind of just suck it up, I guess, but and hope that you have the appropriate grounding to kind of get through it. But yeah, that those types of moments hurt. And even now, speaking on it, some like damn near 15 years later, it's like that still sits, right?
Yeah. How do you kind of deal with that now? Because I'm sure you probably still deal with that all the time, right?
I mean, yeah. I mean, racism was never dead. Yeah, no, racism. Some poor reflection of minorities. I mean, it's an undercurrent that continues to permeate most of society. I won't pretend to say that like we live in this post-racial world, because the reality is that that's not true. And despite the fact that people seem to think it is, it's certainly not the case. It's partially why I had so much frustration with San Francisco.
Yeah.
It like everyone touted this like very neoliberal agenda, but at the same time, it's like the most racism that I ever dealt with outside of the context of my high school was in that city. It was the only time that I've heard the N-word out loud.
That's insane.
In a way that was like pejorative, or the way that was like, like weird. And so I think that was frustrating. It was like not even the fact that people behaved in this way. It was the fact that people behaved in this way and then said that they did. It was like the fact that they had such a drastic departure from their own reality that made that experience so fundamentally frustrating.
Yeah.
Because I can deal with racism if it's overt. I can deal with like you learn to handle it. At least you see the punch coming. What ends up being frustrating is when you get punched in the face and you turn to look to the person who attacked you, and they're like, "Yeah, that wasn't me." And that was like, my guy, really, seriously,
Yeah.
that's what we're doing right now, and that was so profoundly frustrating. I've come to grow up to understand and recognize that like racism will always be a thing. You just have to figure out your way to like navigate it in a way that doesn't bring you to the brink of disaster.
When you were in not high school, basically, when you were in high school, you went to a private school, so that probably happened even more often, right? When you're not in high school, were you in public school before that?
Yeah, you would think when that, I mean, like, yeah, it's just like fucking everywhere. But like, I did not feel the presence of it as profoundly as I did in high school. And I think a lot of that just had to do with just me growing up and like being able to see things. But I also think that like, yeah, my public school is inherently more diverse than my private school. My private school is not one that like they can't claim diversity as a hallmark of the institution. I can tell you that much. Maybe things have changed since then, but certainly when I was in attendance, I was the token. I remember being in classes, and this continued even through college, in which I was the only person of color in that class. Like on one hand, it puts a chip on your shoulder. On the other hand, you kind of feel accomplished. But like it's a weird feeling nonetheless.
Did you ever ask your mom that you didn't want to go to that high school anymore after a certain point?
So my mom and I made an agreement where she was like, hey, look, I'm trying to do what I can to unlock as much opportunity for you as possible. I will choose your high school. You can choose your college. And that's where we landed on an agreement. What I didn't realize is that she was going to choose both my high school and my college. It so happened. I remember because it was actually a funny story. So like I got in to the bulk of the colleges that I applied to. I think the only one that I didn't get into was Columbia, and I think it was waitlisted. I'm not actually sure where that ended, but needless to say, I got into Harvard, and I considered all of my options. I applied to 9 schools, got into nearly all of them, and I was like, all right, like what makes the most sense? My mom and my parents broadly were like, yeah, fuck that. Your ass is going to Harvard. Not only is it Harvard, they also gave me the most money from a financial aid perspective. And so it was like, oh yeah, it's cute how you think you have a choice.
Yeah. In hindsight, if money was not a factor, what college would you have wanted to go to based off of your interests and priorities at that point?
That's a good question. I think top of my list was actually Brown.
Oh, interesting. Why is that?
And I think a lot of it had to do with just like their approach to liberal arts education. Right? Like,
were you thinking about liberal arts education before you went to college? Because you were computer science, right?
Yeah, I mean, I did computer science, but that wasn't something that I realized until halfway through college.
Oh, I did not know that.
Bio for half of college, and then switched over to computer science. And even Harvard was a it was a liberal arts college, and their programming for computer science was very liberal arts in foundation. And so it's funny because it's like I spent very little time coding. I spent most of my time doing, combinatorics, discrete mathematics, algorithms, data management. It was more just like I spent more time writing in math than actually coding.
Yeah.
And the reason for that is like, we don't want to teach you a language. We want to teach you how to. And so you can apply that thinking to any language.
Do you think that's true of most computer science programs? I didn't study CS, so I don't know if that's like the standard.
I feel like what the standard is amongst most places is like, or we'll teach you how to do one language very well. And we'll just like use cases as a way of like developing some degree of sophistication.
I think Duke might have been more similar to Harvard then, because all my CS friends are like, yeah, they didn't teach you how to code. You basically had to take another like what they call house course, which is a student teaches you, like a student like makes a recommendation, like, oh, can I teach this course to students? And like, yeah, sure, you get half credit for it. It's not like graded, whatever. No. And then that's how they learn how to code, by teaching each other how to code.
Yeah.
That's so funny.
And yeah, I mean, like on one hand it's great because it means that your knowledge base is universal. So you're not pigeonholed to a particular language. On the other hand, is like when it comes to or when it comes to doing anything that feels remotely applicable, it's like, oh shit, like I just don't know how to write this.
Yeah.
Like I don't know. I know the logic, but I don't know the syntax.
Yeah. But you could argue the syntax is probably the easy part versus the logic, right?
Yeah. I mean, like, yes, you can definitely make that argument, but in terms of like getting a job post college, sometimes that argument falls on deaf ears.
Yeah, I didn't ever do the CS interview cycle, but I heard it was a lot of algorithms. So
yeah. I mean, it was also like, I think there was some flex. I think Google was willing to exhibit some flex and say like, all right, maybe if you didn't know the syntax, like if you can understand the robustness of your algorithm to the extent that you understand the implications on runtime and the memory usage, that means more. We can teach you the syntax. That means more than you just being able to regurgitate something that you saw on a whiteboard sometime during like your junior year. But yeah, I don't know. It was very liberal. But like back to the question at hand is like, yeah, Brown was interesting because it was like taking that to an extreme. I don't know what I would have studied. I don't know what I would have covered, but like the approach to study felt interesting. And even more so, they had a joint program with, and so I think I would have maybe explored art more.
Oh, that would have been super cool. I think Brian Chesky at Airbnb went to RISD actually.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
I think I could be wrong about that, but he talks about it a lot, so I think he might have.
I mean, that sounds fucking tight.
Yeah, but I heard it's a good like creative school. But were you into the creative arts at that point in time?
Yeah, I mean, also shout outs to Dr. Kisnashenko again. So she would see me. I'm not proud of this. Or maybe a little bit, but like I would spend most of her classes doodling. And at one point I would come to her classes early just because I had a free period or whatever, and just go on the whiteboard and just have at it. And it was in that moment or those moments that Dr. K would be like, why don't you do art more? And I was like, what is art? That's not a thing. That's not gonna make me money. That's not gonna be a generational wealth thing that I'm trying to figure out. I'm gonna do things that feel normal, go to a college that feels normal, get a job that feels normal, and then work from there. And she was like, yeah, cool, whatever. But maybe explore this art thing. And so she was one of my biggest proponents for doing art because I think she saw some level of talent, a lot of which has been diminished since then. I can tell you right now, I can't draw. But at a certain point in time, my aspiration for work was to be a graphic novelist.
Oh, like anime graphic novelist?
Like, to a certain extent, but like almost like comic books, where it's like graphic novels. The distinction between, for me, graphic novels and comic books is that comic books are these serialized programs for which you have issues that extend for any number of iterations. Graphic novels are discrete pieces of work. It's one book. It can be however big of a book it is, but like it's one book. It has a beginning, a middle, denouement, and it's an entire story, and it's captured in one piece. And the level of depth, both in terms of artistry of narrative, but also artistry of design and animation and things of that, are just way more, in my opinion, profound. And so that's what I wanted to explore. That's what I wanted to lean into. That's what I wanted to try to cultivate at one point in my life. And so I have like at home like sketchbooks upon sketchbooks of different pieces, character designs, narratives, arcs, and things of that sort.
Makes so much more sense now, kind of going back to what we talked before about like you being good at storytelling. Like this probably had like some kind of connection between the two, just like your interest in stories and narrative and etc.
Maybe, I don't know. I think it kind of funnels Perhaps it kind of funnels down into that to some degree.
Yeah. Do you think that even though that was an interest that you grew up with and you don't really do it today, you would find joy in maybe pursuing it these days?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, and I struggle with it because it's like one of the things that I struggle with nowadays that was so prolific in my high school experience is this notion of boredom. And for me, and I think for a lot of folks, because I feel like there's a lot of research on this, that boredom unlocks this like layer of creativity where in the lack of in the dearth of stimulation, you're allowed to like really create something magnificent. That it unlocks like synthesis in your brain that allows for just like really creative efforts. And if I'm being honest, I haven't been bored in years.
Yeah.
Not in a way that feels boastful. It's just like there's so much shit going on where like I have like friends, I have a demanding job, I have all of these things that provide almost overt stimulation.
Yep.
That the idea of just like sitting alone with my own thoughts just candidly just doesn't happen very often. Where in high school I was like, if I'm being honest, I didn't have very many friends. I didn't have shit to do. Like I was just alone with my thoughts all the time. And that's when I was like, I think the most creative. It was like I was teaching myself how to play guitar. I was like digging into slam poetry. I was trying to figure out all these things because like those became my hobbies. Those became my creative pursuits. Those are the things that would stave boredom. Those are the things that unlocked some type of creativity that took my mind outside of my bedroom, where I think today I don't have that luxury as much. And so I actively carve it out, and I just haven't had the ability to do that.
Oh, that's interesting. You don't think that all the things that you do today is due to boredom? Like when you're bored, like you want to reach out to a friend. When you're bored, you want to go to these shows, these bars, etc. You don't think that's the cause of the reason why you do all these things?
I think it's not the cause. I think boredom is like explicitly the absence of all of those things. Like boredom is when none of those things are available.
Okay, I think that makes sense. It's just different framing of boredom. I think some people think about boredom in the other way, right?
Yeah.
And then they do all these things to kind of ensure that there is no boredom. But I think I'm like you in that same way because like I don't get bored very easily. I have like 1,000 things I want to do.
Yeah.
And so like I will never be bored. And my girlfriend is just always just like, you're doing way too much stuff and yada, yada, yada. So it's kind of interesting.
Yeah, I mean, like, yeah, for me, it's like I've always defined, and this may be different for different people, but like my boredom is an absence of stimulation, is an absence of the availability of those things where like I have no choice.
Yeah, because another way I think about it is I feel like I know a lot of people who are bored, and because they're bored, they watch TV, and so that will kind of fulfill that boredom.
Yeah,
but just at the surface level.
Sure.
And so like they might watch things to kind of get over that boredom, but after they watch it, do they really feel better about themselves?
Yeah.
I mean, those are the people who are like binge watching like hours and hours and hours in the same time frame, because you can definitely just watch for entertainment, and that's great also as well.
Totally.
Yeah. So I mean, I do that all the time too.
I'm guilty of it. In fact, I have a Sunday ritual in which like Sunday is my veg state. I just like literally just veg out and just like watch anime and order DoorDash and like talk to no one, do nothing. I plan nothing, and just like it's like my nirvana.
Wait, I'm exactly the same way too. Sunday is like my sacred. I try to keep it protected as much as possible. I'm probably successful 50% of the time, but I try.
Oh, dude, I'm like 80% to the extent that like it's not, like people know not to hit me up. Like they know what answer I'm going to give them. It's going to be a flat ass no. But yeah, no, it's like I wish, to a certain extent, I wish that I created more opportunities for boredom in my life. I think, especially moving back to New York, especially
too much simulation.
Yo, I like honestly, I had to like make a resolution to myself to like calm the fuck down because there's so much.
There's way too much.
New York is the best way I know to describe it is a land of indulgence across every dimension you can think of, whether it's food, whether it's social life, whether it's art, whether it's culture. Like there's so many things to just engage in a way that feels overindulgent. And so like stimulation is there, and like being able to carve yourself away from that and find some semblance of balance is a very difficult proposition. And I know I struggled with it, especially in the context of this summer, because this summer was lit. It was just like, it felt like COVID didn't exist. It felt like people were returning to the city for the first time. Even, I don't know, there was a lot of components that contributed to just, I think, was a good time, but like not at all sustainable. And so trying to find or strike balance in the heart of all of that is like a very difficult thing to do.
Do you think you found it now that the winter has kind of hit?
I'm getting closer. And for me, balance is a number of different things. It's like spending more time with my family. It's like spending more time with friends that I care about. But it's a work in progress. I recognize that there's probably no end state, but like there's an idea of like moving into the right direction.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Also, I think we're gonna take a pause. I use the restroom really badly, so we're gonna take a commercial break. We will be right
Tune
back.
into our sponsors.
Yeah, tune into sponsors, commercials, etc. We will
Next
be right
advertisement
back.
brought to you by Tushy.
Yep. Hello. We're back from commercial break. Thank you for our sponsors today. I also realized we didn't do an intro. KJ, do you want to introduce yourself? Tell us about yourself.
Yeah, you want to know. Hello, folks. My name is KJ Sidberry. I'm a New York native, born and raised in Harlem and Stamford, Connecticut, actually. Spent some time in San Francisco, which is when I had the pleasure and the opportunity of meeting the great Andy in the context of a job that we had together at Accent. Things just kind of took a turn from there. Won't hope for the best. And
you were young, naive, not as good looking,
beardless. Although I guess you're back at the hair length that you had before.
Yes, I am. And you're also back at the hair color that you had before.
Yes, absolutely true. Yeah, sometimes the return to the basics is needed, is much needed and appreciated.
It's always funny because coincidentally we just do these things around the same time. Like I was growing out my man bun, you're growing out your yellow hair, blonde hair.
We just go through our life transformations. I think we're just like we hit stages pretty simultaneously, which
Literally.
is always funny. To very different extents, right? Like I changed my color, you changed your length, and we just kind of just figure it out from there.
But yeah, that was a really good segment for the first part. So fun shooting the shit. This is about shooting the shit with Andy. So that's my podcast. And you said that you had something in mind that you wanted to talk about.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It kind of relates to the first segment.
Let's
curious,
keep going.
I'm curious to understand, when was the last time you were bored? Because like you've always struck me as an individual that is a man of many talents and many hobbies and many engagements and many pursuits. A lot of things to kind of keep you occupied, either in the context of work, but also in the context of just personal development. When's the last time you've like sat with your thoughts in the absence of all of those things?
That's a really great question. I actually started meditating consistently earlier this year. So last year, I started consistently writing through my journal. And my journal is really scattered. It's like, it makes zero sense to anybody else who were to read it. And because I built up that habit last year, it's like I don't take any energy to journal every single day, multiple times a day now. And so earlier this year, I wanted to do the same thing with meditation. And luckily, Airbnb paid for a Headspace membership.
Oh, love that.
And so I basically meditate from 20 to 40 minutes a day for meditation. And then another thing I recently started as well is I used to listen to a shit ton of podcasts, audiobooks, etc., music, anywhere I'm going. And so I'll start my day with about like a 15 to 20 minute walk where I just walk in silence outside. And so that's like on top of my meditation. So that's also very meditative. Yeah. These are things that nobody really sees or understands or talks about, but I think it's interesting, right? But that was mostly because of two things, actually. One of which is for the last few months, I've been having a lot of issues with sleep. And so I'm not sure if you ever heard of Andrew Huberman.
I've not.
He's a Stanford researcher who has a podcast that talks a lot about kind of health, fitness, and the science behind all these different things. And he said that one of the things that you can do to get better sleep is sun exposure.
Yeah, I've heard that.
If you get sun exposure early in the morning, especially when you wake up, it will better regulate the melatonin that you have in your body. And so at nighttime, you're more equipped to have better sleep.
Yeah.
And so that's why I basically started walking in the morning outside every morning. But I also felt like being in COVID for so long, I was feeling very lethargic of just like the whole world. And I just wanted to just kind of get away from everything. So I started kind of doing the no audio, no nothing, just walk. Sometimes I won't even bring my phone.
Wow.
I'll just go on a walk for 20 minutes.
That's impressive.
Or not. But that also was due to because I was listening to this other podcast that was talking about how going on walks after you eat is probably one of the most healthy thing you can do for your insulin. And so there's this one, I think it's a Michelin star chef, or it's just like a really popular like fine dining chef. He got really into health and fitness. And so he got this like glucose monitor to track his glucose like every single second of the day,
Yeah.
everything he would eat, everything he would do. And he noticed that certain foods spike his insulin despite like it being very regular. And then also going on a walk right after you eat like really helps mediate that insulin that you have in your body, which usually is good for fat regulation and like not fat gaining, etc. Right. And so one of the best things you can do after you eat is just go on like a short 10-15 minute walk. And so I started combining all these different things together.
Love that.
And then so then basically I just started morning walks. This is great. Start my day with that, get some sun, etc. Yeah. Some days I don't do it. Like I think this entire week I did it except for I think yesterday or the day before yesterday where work was just so crazy. Just like went straight into it. Yeah. But I try to start my day with that. It was really hard in the beginning because I just love listening to something. I think it's I think I have like a mild case of ADHD or something.
Got it.
I'm going to try to get diagnosed next year and see if I actually have it because I feel like
I mean, it could be worthwhile.
Yeah,
Just
exactly.
Discover that element about yourself.
Exactly. So anyways, going back to that, I actually get a lot of time to my thoughts, either journaling, meditation, all these different kind of mechanisms. But you're right. Like I'm not bored very often. Yeah. I feel like there's just so much great fun things about life. Yeah. And I'm still in the explore mode versus the exploit mode. I'm not sure if you heard the explore versus exploit kind of paradigm. Yeah, it's basically you can kind of explore before you exploit.
Yeah.
And I think when you're younger, it's better to explore because you don't know what you'll like.
Got it.
And so if you try a lot of different things, you find out what you like and then you start to exploit it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's an interesting paradigm only because even at the age in which I guess we're at, where we're encroaching 30, I'm not sure if I feel maybe it's the license, maybe it's the opportunity to exploit, because I feel like there's so much that feels uncharted and untapped that moving or pivoting to an exploit mode feels like a challenge to the explorer when there's so much to explore.
Yeah.
And I don't know, maybe that I see that in the context of a new environment or an old but friendly environment in New York because I'm from here, but I've never lived here as an adult. And so like the exploration mechanisms are still pretty profound, but I feel like there's so much left to kind of like explore and uncover or unearth that I'm not sure if I ever really feel comfortable exploiting.
Yeah. What are you currently exploring right now?
Everything. I mean, you ever saw the movie? I don't even know if it's old at this point, but maybe it's by Jim Carrey. It's called Yes Man, in which the premise of the entire film was that Jim Carrey was forced into a position in which he couldn't say no to anything. In fact, he had to say yes.
Oh, I think I've seen that.
Yeah. And it was through these experiences that he was able to unlock some level of joy and passion because he was able to really explore his curiosity and really say yes to things that would otherwise or ordinarily warrant a no. Obviously, that could work to your detriment, and obviously that could be a very dangerous proposition. But I like the idea of being able to say yes to a lot of things because it does give me the maximum opportunity to explore and discover things that I wouldn't know otherwise. Whether it's like an exhibit that I wouldn't have explored that I've found some appreciation in, or a neighborhood that I kind of adventured into, but like, why would I have any business going into it? And I feel like those moments of interesting serendipity or moments in which you really disrupt what is commonplace and traditional and normal and routine is usually where I find the greatest level of joy in life.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. Have you gone to the point where there are some things that you don't enjoy that doesn't give you energy?
Fucking hate. Yeah. I mean,
you still say yes to them
inevitably.
Like, what is an example of
work?
that?
No, I'm kidding.
Ooh, that's something deep. I want to explore a little bit more.
I mean, I don't know. So there are elements of work. Obviously, they give me joy. And if that weren't the case, like I think there would be more of an impetus to move on. But like, yeah, there's other things that, are less joyful, inevitably. Like, there's things that may be routine or things that may be rote. Like there are elements to the job that are a little bit less joyful.
Do you think that if you could spend less time doing the work that you do today to spend more time doing other endeavors, would you choose that if you could?
Yes. But that's because I'm a person who maximizes or who would like to maximize the diversity of experience where it almost doesn't matter the quality as much as as the quantity, because then you're more in a position to identify what the things that you do like and the things that you don't like. And even in sometimes the bad positions, there's still learning opportunities embedded within them.
Yeah. Do you have an example of that maybe?
So like I'll start off super benign and then maybe we can navigate to something more complex. Imagine ordering from DoorDash, right? sometimes you have the restaurants that you know are going to be fire because you've ordered from there before, and in fact you ordered from there routinely. So you're like, yo, dog, like I know the biryani from this one place is going to be fuego.
Yeah.
But sometimes you take the chance. And you're like, you know what? Let's try this new Jamaican restaurant from Queens and see like how that goes.
I'm 100% of that camp. Whereas like given like 10 options, I will generally choose the things that I haven't chose before to see if I'll like it, because in the 10% chance that I do like it and I like it so much more, it kind of counteracts the 90% chance that I hate all the other ones so much.
Yeah. I mean, like sometimes that exploration breeds an opportunity to discover things that fundamentally change your world, right?
Yeah.
Where it just unlocks. Because like if you never, and it's like, honestly, and I hate to sound cheesy about it, but it really reminds me of this episode of Ted Lasso, which is like very quickly become like my favorite show on the fucking planet, especially in the context of COVID. It's like, it's my feel good.
Is it on Netflix, by the way?
It's on Apple TV.
Okay.
He has this there's this episode in which he explains that the people that bullied him in the past lacked curiosity, because curiosity means a concerted effort of understanding the things around you. And the thing about curiosity is that it almost implores you to be inquisitive, to ask questions, to explore, to understand that you don't know everything and that there's more to learn. And yeah, DoorDash is like a very simplistic example because like, all right, yeah, I could be curious about other things, but like on the heels of curiosity can be some really profound life experiences that you almost protect yourself if you don't exercise that level of curiosity. Yeah. And so like, I don't want to be my biggest worst enemy. I don't want to be the biggest barrier that exists between me and some profound discovery. And so leaning into that curiosity is like an exciting endeavor.
No, I love that so much. I feel like I live that a lot, and I analogize it to, have you ever heard of this concept called Anti-Fragility by Nassim Nicholas Taleb?
It sounds very familiar.
Yeah, so basically that book was his third book in his like 4-book series right after Black Swan. So this author, he wrote Black Swan, which is basically about tail events, kind of like the pandemic, right?
Yeah.
And then Anti-Fragile is basically what you can do to counteract like black swans or really rare events and take advantage of them.
Yeah.
And so the way I think about this is like, or the way he thinks about this, and I now just apply that thinking, is this concept of the barbell strategy. And so the barbell strategy is basically, if you think about things that will give you like a lot of leverage. And so I think the simplest example, I'm going to butcher this a lot, so apologize for the listeners who like are trying to understand what I'm trying to explain about anti-fragile or barbell strategy. But if you think about a stock portfolio, and you can basically put all your money to index funds and it'll give you like an 8% return over year, right? But there's still a chance that all that can collapse. And so another strategy is, let's say you put most of it to just cash and you'll lose money due to inflation. But the barbell strategy is like most of it is in cash. But let's say you have like the 20% that are in like really large bets.
Yeah.
Very low probability of success, basically the tail distribution. And those things that you kind of try to make more successful might bring even more than all of the combined index funds generation that you would get. And so like being anti-fragile in your kind of optionality.
Sure.
And choosing like things that you're unsure if you'll like, and you'll probably fail at 8 out of 10 of those. But the 2 that you like so much that will make up the difference of the rest of the 10.
Yeah. I mean, it feels to some extent, not purely, but to some extent akin to like the venture model.
Yeah, no, exactly. That's
it's like you have what ends up happening or materializing is like a very few select bets that you make out of an entire portfolio that cover the entire cost basis and then some.
Exactly.
By a multiple, ideally, of like 3 to more.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean that feels realistic. That feels like it adheres to kind of like the physics of this world. You know what I mean? Like the rules of logic that seems to dictate how things tend to operate. Yeah, I don't know. I mean,
do you think that's similar to how you think about, not exactly like consciously about DoorDash, but like if I try this new restaurant, like if I like it so much that it'll be worthwhile?
Yeah, I mean, I've made some profound and incredible discoveries.
I'm curious, what are these founders actually?
I mean, like I found some dope ass restaurants.
Gotta send me them my way.
I will definitely like. I don't know if they deliver this far because a lot of them have been in Brooklyn, but like one Thai place in particular, like chef's kiss. But like on the heels of that, and I need to do, and personally, I need to do a better job at that. At this is like, there's no greater disappointment than ordering something off of DoorDash in an experimentation, getting something that is shitty and knowing that, fuck, there was something tried and true that I could have ordered that would have been delightful, but I didn't. I wanted to be curious. I wanted to be adventurous. And instead, I got this like shitty ass hot dog, whatever the case may be. And so, like, I need to, what I'm describing is like a tale of two paths, right? Where you either ride the waves and enjoy both the peaks and the valleys, or you decide to like maintain some semblance of neutrality where there's no disruption to it. There's a steady state, but you never feel elated and you also never feel depressed. And I can't argue for which people, what path makes the most sense. But I guess I'm exploring a mind in which I'd rather ride the waves than be decidedly neutral.
Were you neutral more before? Is that why this? Oh, you were? I'm surprised.
I was 100% neutral.
Wait, really? In like SF and before
in
that?
Every facet of everything.
Do you have an example? Because I always thought you were more like the high waves.
I was incredibly neutral to the extent that it was actually creating friction in my family. Like, as on a super personal note, I was so neutral about things that my mom had to ask me at one point if I like loved her, because I was so robotic relative to everything that I didn't really display emotions. I really didn't feel emotions. And if I did, I would do everything to course correct. Like, everything would be calibrated.
Do you think you were like hedging psychologically, basically?
Totally.
Oh, interesting. What changed that then?
One, recognizing that most people in this world do not operate that way. And so for the folks that you love and care about, it creates a really strong point of friction.
I'm actually surprised you said that you think most people don't operate that way. I actually feel like most people that I know, at least, operate in the more like very constant, stagnant.
I don't know. I can't say that I know a ton of people who are that even keeled permanently.
Got it.
Like, I think a lot of folks still react to things and try to bring themselves back to some neutral state. But like, I think for the most part, people still feel.
Yeah.
Me, I just try to like really remove.
So the reason why I say that, I feel like I would consider you more like risk taking versus risk adverse. And so like you'll kind of jump into situations where you're not sure if you'll like it or not, basically kind of like the DoorDash, right? Yeah. And be open to failing, like being disappointed, etc. But I feel like a lot of people I know, they're very fearful of the unknown and being rejected, failing, etc. And so they'll just take the path that they know will be very discontent. Yeah. But at least they know that discontent.
Yeah, there's like it's a path of that's tried and true.
Exactly,
right?
Exactly. Have you seen otherwise?
That's an interesting observation, because I would say the majority of my life has been entirely risk averse.
Wow.
Like, to the extent that like risk was something that was scary and should be avoided at all costs.
Do you think this changed when you moved to New York or before that too?
I would say that I became more aware of it right before I moved to New York. I think I'm starting to embrace it, and I still wouldn't consider myself a risk tolerant individual yet. Yeah. But I'm slowly but surely navigating towards that realm, and especially in the context of New York, where I think there's a few things at play. One, there are a lot more things that I think are active and worthwhile to justify risk taking, where there's just so many things that are kind of just percolating, where like you feel like the risk could potentially be worth it. And then two, I now feel the presence of a safety net, one that has always existed, but feels so much more present now, in the sense that like my family's here. So I mean, like, absolute worst case scenario, I live in my mom's basement. Yeah. And trust me, that's the worst case scenario. But like it does to some level afford me some freedom and flexibility to kind of take risks. Now, don't get me wrong, if I was really risky, like I'd be all up in crypto.
Oh,
I'm still exposed. Like, I still have exposure in crypto. Like, I mean, like, to the extent that like maybe I might be founding a company in Web3, or maybe I might be doing something that feels different than
that's great.
My day to day.
I've been thinking about that a lot, actually. So I love that you mentioned that. Yeah, that's great.
I mean, like, if I couldn't think of a better ecosystem to do it than
exactly
New York at the moment.
Yeah.
So like, I don't claim to not be risk averse at this point, but I definitely think that where I am now is a hell of a lot different than where I was before.
Yeah, because I think when I knew you in SF, I feel like you were definitely not risk averse from a career standpoint. Like, you knew when to leave, you knew when to try new things, you knew like what you wanted, what you needed. Versus I feel like a lot of us, we stayed at places much longer than we should have. I guess, where did you feel that you were risk averse, and what categories of areas when you were still in San Francisco?
So in the context of work, what was always more important for me was like I never wanted to feel like I was running from something as much as I feel like I wanted to feel like I was running to something. And so even if things were bad where I was currently, I didn't want that to be the driving motivator for me leaving until I found something that was worth leaving.
That's
for.
fair.
I would say that I had an interestingly unique experience in all of my work experiences where I was like, things got real bad, and so it put some fire into my ass to find something real good.
Yeah.
Right. And that drove a lot of the decision making in that regard. Outside of work, I think it was like a level of slow experimentation. It started off small, like DoorDash, right? And then just kind of expanded outwards where incrementally, bit by bit, I was like, you know what? Let's explore what risk could look like in this dimension or this domain or in this decision or that. And you start to realize that like, yeah, these valleys suck, but these peaks can be magical. And in the greater scheme of things, what you end up remembering are the peaks. And so when I look back or like think of my life, like I really resonate with the peaks more so than I do with the valleys. And so it's like, why not continue to live life to some degree or some measure of that? Where like my life is defined by the times that I said, fuck it, versus the times that I decided not to. And I think that's made life more fulfilling. I think that made life more worthwhile. I think it means that I show up in very different ways. And I don't know, I feel like enriched by the experience. But that's not to say that, you know, it doesn't come with some hardship. It doesn't come with some pitfalls. It doesn't come with some, you know, bad hot dog.
But sometimes like it's only that fulfilling when you kind of had both of those peaks and valleys to really like cement like the feeling of that. If it's always good all the time, you have nothing to really like compare it to. It's just like
I think you hit it right on the money, where I think in the spirit of all of this is this element of gratitude, where because you've experienced the valleys, you appreciate the peaks more.
Yeah, for sure.
Right?
Maybe the peaks aren't actually as great as you think it is, but the valley puts things in perspective.
Precisely, right? And it's like it gives you a newfound, more profound appreciation for when there are peaks, because it's like you get to value them so much different. And I equate this to like my experience in New York. So they're largely the reason that I moved out of New York when I graduated college was because like if I didn't leave then, I would never leave. And I wanted to at least afford myself an experience that felt different than New York and San Francisco, because like I'm still a city kid by heart, and so that kind of, you know, constrains the opportunity set a little bit. And like, yeah, San Francisco was fun. It wasn't my home. It wasn't my place.
Would you do it again?
What? Go
Given,
back?
Yeah, like
hell no. Well, I mean, like if will I do it again now? No. Will I do it again if I were younger?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Because what it taught me was a greater appreciation for New York. So now coming back here, I'm like almost like a kid in a toy store, where like a lot of the things that used to frustrate the shit out of me, I'm now grateful for. Like when it snows, I'm like the first person out there like making snow angels. Just like, because I now have so much more appreciation for everything that New York is, because it was absent for me. And so like to the extent that you can impart some level of gratitude into all facets of life, I think it just makes I think it's like adding MSG to shit. It just makes things so much better.
I agree. I think it's also like adding spice to shit, because
totally
in the moment the peaks are still high, but then afterwards your bowels are like killing me.
All right, this metaphor may have been overextended.
Totally kidding. But not.
Like, but yeah, no, totally. I mean, it is fun. It's its own thought experiment to play with your own perspective, because that's the only thing that you really have to own, right? Like everything else is external. You may not have ownership or agency over any of those things, but what you do have ownership over is the way you think about them and the way you internalize things. And so to like have some mastery, and God knows that I don't.
Yeah.
But some mastery over that is like kind of interesting. It's to play with your own perspective of how you treat, operate, and interact with things.
For sure. I guess if you think about what gave you the courage to be more risk tolerant, like if there are listeners out there trying to be more risk tolerant and live more of the peaks and valleys, how do they overcome that desire to be risk averse?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing is just like taking it piece by piece. Start small. Start
with DoorDash.
Start small. It's like being risk tolerant doesn't mean that you have to absolutely swing for the fences for the decisions that mean the most in life. It could take the form or the shape of something incredibly small, whether it's DoorDash or going to a liquor store and buying something new, right?
That's another great example. Yeah.
Yeah, where it doesn't have to be this monumental thing. It starts small and then you just adjust and flex from there. And what you'll find is that once you've done it enough times, you might actually gain an appreciation of value from the exercise that then gives you the license to take bigger leaps. And by the time you know it, it's like you're in a position where like you're taking leaps that felt unimaginable before. So yeah, my recommendation, as with most things, honestly, is just to start small, but also like give yourself grace. Like, and in the spirit of all of this, some shit's not gonna work out. That's just life. The thing is like you could be neutral and shit not work out. You could be risk intolerant and shit not work out. So you might as well afford yourself an opportunity for things to work extremely well if the likelihood of things working out also exists or persists.
Yeah. Is there something that you wish you were able to be more risk tolerant about today that you haven't been able to do quite yet?
Oh, that's a good. I would say that something that feels top of mind for me is, and this is weird to say, is communication.
In what way?
What I mean by that is that a lot of relationships hinge on communication, having open dialogue, being able to like express the thoughts or feelings that you might have with another person because you were indeed engaged in a relationship. One of the hurdles that I face is that I'm the type of person to like hold and withhold. And what I mean by that is that I will hold your feelings, I will withhold mine. And so the communication ultimately ends up feeling one-sided. And so if you're angry with me, I will hold all of your anger and I will never explain my frustration. If I'm angry with you, I will never explain anything and just try to pretend like it doesn't happen.
Was there a particular reason why you had that calculus up
Yeah.
until this point?
Totally. It's because growing up, I didn't have very many friends. And so it's the law of scarcity. It was like where I didn't have it, therefore I'm doing everything I can to preserve it. And so if I feel like I'm doing anything to kind of put that at risk, I was like throw it on a shelf somewhere. What I'm learning, or I'm trying to unlearn, I guess in some cases, is that that's not how you preserve a relationship. In fact, a lot of people appreciate when you're open, honest, and authentic and genuine with each other, such that like you can grow. And on the heels of whatever dialogue you may have, you find yourself in a position that's so much stronger. And so that's something that I'm trying to like piece together for myself, where I'm trying to figure out a world in which, in the context of communication, I could take more risks and put myself more out there. And I don't think the reality is that I'll lose people. Maybe that might be the case. But I think the reward on the other end of that is so much greater than the downside risk that I've implanted in my head.
Yeah, I've definitely been thinking about this a lot recently, about some of the things that we learned growing up. It's sometimes more difficult to unlearn than learn something new. When you learn something at such a young age, it's just ingrained in your like blood for some reason.
It's embedded into your every fiber of your being.
Exactly. And to change who you are is also to let go of who you were to some degree. And that's scary.
It is scary, but I think that's also the most magical thing about life, is because you have every opportunity to do so. It's like almost like, I don't know, any type of reptile. You can kind of shed your skin whenever.
Yeah, there's this really good quote I like from Naval that I was telling you about before. I'm gonna butcher this again, but it's basically like everyone has two lives until they realize that they only have one.
Interesting. I like that.
Yeah,
that's meta as fuck. I would challenge that, in that, or rather, I would nuance it. I don't know if that's a verb, but I'm making it one. You have one life, but the way in which you choose to live it can be multidimensional.
No, I completely agree.
Where
I think it's still true with that quote too.
Truly, but like you can choose to be whoever you need to be, whoever you want to be at any moment. Yeah. I think, and I see this in the context of relationships, where there's a frustration associated with like, oh, this person's changed, this person's different. Yeah, be different. Every person's evolving. Every person should be different. It's called growth, right? And it's scary, because like think about it in the context of relationship. It's like, say you get married to someone and like that person that you married is different than the person that they are now. Like, that's not to say you still can't be married. You still can't find partnership in all of that. But like, hopefully that person continues to grow. That person shouldn't stop growing in the context of just you, right? Yeah. And so like, I'm entirely interested in living multiple lives where every junction, every period, every moment is an opportunity to be a little bit different than I was before. So like in essence, I'm living infinite lives because like I'm trying to be a little bit different than the person I was even 5 minutes ago, because like that's the evolution that I'm pursuing. That's the level of growth that I think would help me find all of the enrichment in life. And so like you live one life because like, yeah, the shit isn't granted tomorrow. And as a byproduct of that, you should live as many lives as possible.
No, I completely agree with that too. One of my favorite authors, I'm not sure if you've ever heard of Derek Sivers. One of the things that he talks about often is I think that a lot of people kind of have decision paralysis about what they want to do in life. They're like, oh, I want to do these 2, 3, 4 different things. And they're like, I can't choose any of it. So I'm not going to do any of it. I'm just going to do that one thing that I'm not currently happy with because they can't choose. But if you really think about in the grand scheme of things, we're working for 30, 40 years of our life. If you think about it, you can probably do each one of those careers for 10 years and still make it okay. And so like, you can pretty much live more than one life in that like definition. But I think a lot of people that I know, I don't know about your friends, maybe your friends are more risk tolerant, but there's this inability to kind of go off the path that's already paved and etc.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's just a fundamental human psychological trait.
Yeah.
So like you see a path that's paved, it inherently means less effort, or at least effort that is well defined. And so therefore like that makes
the path of least resistance, right?
Totally. It takes a special type of person to jump into the fucking bush, right? Like to be like, yo, like I don't know what the hell's going on over here. And it's like, it's not even just in like, if I'm being honest, and this is why, and I come across this conversation a lot, particularly in the context of entrepreneurship, it low key takes a level of hubris to do that.
Yeah.
And like to many, that hubris is off-putting, and to many, that hubris is inaccessible.
Yeah.
Whereas like you have to think of yourself so highly that you see a path,
yeah,
and you literally say to yourself, "Fuck that! I'm about to like take this machete and go to work."
Yeah.
On like this bush.
But I also think that is kind of the constructs and what society, at least not society, our generation has put pressure on. Like it has to be this unicorn, this $1 billion company. So you basically have to sacrifice your life for it. But I think there's actually the intermediate between us and like the entrepreneur that you think about that you're funding for like the $1 billion valuations, where like you could probably work a pretty modest life for yourself, 40-hour weeks, and still make it pretty well off for yourself.
Oh yeah, easily.
But
yeah.
I feel like that's like not
it's a story that's not told.
Exactly. No one knows about it. Like
yeah.
It's so surprising. Like when I found out about all this stuff, it's like, holy shit, you can make so much without sacrificing everything.
And it's like your definition of what success looks like. Is making a lot of money like the conduit for your own happiness?
Yeah.
Like there's people who live with less who are like more happy than we are, who might make more than them, right?
I completely agree.
And so like it's to what extent you find a journey that resonates with you.
Yeah. I think also to add on to that too, I think it's not just like money aspect, but just time.
Yeah.
Because as you get older, I think like we are confined by our jobs to be at certain places at certain times, and we don't have the time to do whatever we want. And so we can get that time back in any shape or form. I think that is like probably, I don't think anybody would argue that that's not what they want, more time back to do whatever they choose to do, whether that be continue to work, whatever they want to do, you know?
No, totally. I mean, I think one of the scarcest resources that we have is indeed time. And so we need to protect it with our lives, quite literally, and make sure that anything that we decide to allocate time and resources to are things that feel meaningful and worthwhile, which is literally, ironically, the counter of venture.
Yeah.
They would say the opposite. Because like the venture, the industry in which I work is one in which I see thousands of companies a year only invest in 0.01% of them. They're like, is that efficient? Like, is that how that works? And everyone would note that like the scarcity is not with time, but with good companies. But that does a disservice to the time that you spend. And so like, I don't know, it's kind of like a weird scenario. And I think a lot of other employers, a lot of other jobs would kind of perceive something similar, where it's like, no, the scarcity is not your time. It's what we have access to that makes our business more meaningful. And maybe that might be true, or maybe it's not. If you like, it's a matter of perspective. Are you thinking from the perspective of the industry? Or are you thinking from the perspective of yourself? Because I know personally speaking that yes, to a certain extent, I treat my time as dispensable, but I know that's going to change fundamentally when I have a kid. Like, I know that the moment, and this is why I don't have a kid. I like the because it's like I'm not ready for it. But the moment that I have a child, I know that my priority set is going to shift dramatically. And I'm looking forward to it.
Mm-hmm.
But I also recognize like that's just a ways off from now. And the thing that I want to be true for my life for is like the dedication to that kid, and where everything else falls second. And I like, it's still unclear what that might like realize, or what that look like in the future, and what that might translate into from a work perspective. Like all of those things are open questions, and who's to say what? But like, I know that my translation of life is going to look a lot different.
I think I'm in the same boat as you. I think I'm working so hard and exploring as much as I can right now, because I know the moment I have a kid, I will basically be exploiting my time to just give them my full attention and just like help them navigate the world in the way that I wasn't been able to do at a young age. And I think it will just be a whole another adventure, a very different but fun and fulfilling adventure.
Totally.
Yeah.
But it's an adventure that's like, that has different characteristics certainly than the one they're on right now, right? Like what defines you may have a lot to do with hobbies and professional development and personal development. And that's not to say that those things go away.
Yeah.
But like they may fall short, and to some degree or some respect, when you have like a kid in the picture, when you're like, oh shit, like this whole ass body of life that I now need to take care of, and whose future I'm responsible for.
Yeah, for sure.
And so that changes the game. And so like I joke in that, and I think it's consistent with consulting too. Is like I joked is like I want to make sure I'm a PDF partner by the time I have a kid.
What is PDF?
A PDF partner is one in which I'm not trying to touch Excel. I'm not trying to touch Word. I'm not trying to make edits. Like, you hand shit off to me when it's in PDF form, and I'll react to it. I want to be an iPad partner where like,
I love that. I love
people
that.
who do I'll do the thinking, people do the brunt of the work, but I want to be an iPad partner, PDF partner by the time I have a kid.
I've never heard that before, but that is incredible. That's a great analogy, honestly.
Totally, man. That's the goal, I guess, to something, at least for right now. Who knows if that might change by like tomorrow, but like at least for the moment right now, that's it.
And you could probably look at your parents. They're not bored when they're like at that age where they're having kids. They had kids, multiple kids, right?
Yeah, I mean, they're not bored, but like, I don't know. I have 4 parents. So I have 2 step parents and 2, biological parents. And looking at their lives, it's like I've gotten a crash course in completely different dynamics. I've seen a mother that may be too coddling and like too all up in my business and entirely overprotective. And then I've seen parents that are too removed. And so I've seen the full spectrum of what parenthood could look like to a certain extent. I won't claim to say the full spectrum, but at least broad coverage. And so like for me, I just take that as like data points to kind of figure out like what is it that I want to accomplish. Yeah. But like, yeah, it's a little at home, it's a little bit of a mix. Like I've seen like my brothers are not latchkey. I wouldn't disservice my parents by that statement, but like relative to like my upbringing, it feels a lot different than what my brothers on my father's side are experiencing.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, but I don't know. It's hard to say like which mode feels right. You just take in these data points and then determine like what is it that you want to accomplish, and like what feels right for you, and what
your partner wants probably too, right? It gets even more complicated.
Yeah, I was about to say that opens up a whole other. But yeah, I don't know. It's a multidimensional thing, kind of delivering on a product and kind of figuring out like what makes the most sense.
Yeah, for sure. But I think we've been going for like almost an hour and a half, and so it's probably a good way to close out the conversation. But this has been really fun. Any last words about the thing that we're talking about today you want to mention?
Well, shit, no pressure at all. Yeah, I mean, I don't mean to preach. I don't mean to pontificate, but I think there's a life worth living in the spirit of being risk tolerant and embracing risk, not as a detriment to life, but as a celebration of what could be. So that would be my last words. I think I'll just leave it at there.
Love it. Thank you so much for coming to my apartment and doing this podcast with me. I was actually planning going longer, but my bladder is really bad and I just needed to go to the restroom again. But I'm pretty sure we'll probably have a round 2 at some point. So
for sure.
Yeah. All right. Cut.